Hello and welcome to the Tank Club. I've been an MMORPG player since the age of 13, starting out in Tibia and eventually moving on to the Elder Scrolls Online and New World. I decided to dive into a classic and a still massively popular MMO with World of Warcraft. I'm about 12 hours into the game, and as expected, I have started my journey as a tank. So what is it like for a new player going into World of Warcraft as a tank in 2023? These are my first impressions. So my reasons for heading into World of Warcraft comes down to the content and endgame. It's a game that is almost 20 years old, so there is an abundance of content including raids and dungeons. There appears to be a very healthy community of people participating in those activities, along with plenty of access into endgame content. The initial starting experience is good. You can't really go wrong as you follow the path, you follow the quest line, and you progress through the initial beginner area. It is somewhat overwhelming as you quickly progress through your first few levels and you unlock many spells and talents. The game guides you on everything down to equipping spells, gear, and everything else, so that information is all covered. Once you complete this area, you're then taken to your Alliance main city. If, like me, you haven't played World of Warcraft before, there are lots of information to take in. I have been taking my time to try and understand everything. Trying to find locations of certain NPCs is a challenge at first, but you can ask a guard where to find certain NPCs. But it can still be unclear from the map as to where you're supposed to go, especially when there is a lift involved that you had no idea that it existed. Up to now, I have mostly just done what the game has told me via the quests to gain levels, and apparently this is one of the easiest ways to level up, so kind of combining random dungeons alongside doing all of your quest lines. One of the interesting things about World of Warcraft is the combat, and it maintains its very classic MMO combat style. I've gone somewhat backwards in my MMO progression coming to World of Warcraft after more recent releases that have more modern and active combat. I have found the combat to be simple, but also difficult to get used to. Up to now, combat has mostly been select a target, instigate combat, stand still, and then rotate through cooldowns. On the odd occasion, I might have to step out of an AoE, but aside from that, it is quite simple. The part that's difficult is having 24 different skills slotted. It took me a good few hours to figure out which skills to use, which skills are not worth using, and then place them onto my skill bar in a way that I would remember what they do, and be able to rotate through them in a logical way. It's definitely going to take some practice to get used to combat, mostly because every MMO that I've played, I've done it differently. So in Tibia, I used the arrow keys for movement, the F keys for the abilities. When I moved to ESO, I began on Xbox, so I was using a controller, and then I moved to PC, and I continued using the controller. When I came to New World, it's all about WASD and only having 3 usable skills per weapon, so it's quite an easy combat design to get used to. World of Warcraft uses the whole 1 to equals buttons along your keyboard, and it's going to require some consistent bar placement of skills and experience to get used to where everything is while in combat situations, and while in those critical moments, reacting quickly to get an interrupt, reacting quickly to hit a mitigation skill or a taunt or whatever it is. It's definitely going to take a bit of practice. I took some time to get my bar in order so I could tank some content, so I could get a feel for how things are when it comes to tanking content. I firstly did a random dungeon and ended up in the Motherlode, and got a taste for my first bit of group content in World of Warcraft. Coming from a more active tanking game like ESO and New World, where you have to physically block damage, roll dodge to evade attacks, and you're frequently light attacking, heavy attacking, World of Warcraft is a more passive tank style compared to those games. You have to highlight your target, and your character will auto attack it. You then click a skill and it puts your skills on both an individual cooldown as well as having a skill cast cooldown. This means that you have to be really decisive in which skills you use and when. When tanking content, the resource I'm looking at is my health bar and then my rage, which is a red bar under your health bar. And rage is needed for the use of some skills. So your skills sometimes need rage, and then they have to be off cooldown as well. But you don't have like stamina skills, magicka skills, and things like that you have to worry about, at least not with the particular character that I have chosen. Rage is needed for the use of some skills. I have certain abilities that give rage, I have some that use rage, and then I've got other skills that can be spammed without needing rage, and those are usually the skills that you're having to cast when you are low on rage, so that you're able to maintain doing something while in combat. Blocking in World of Warcraft isn't a guaranteed thing. It's a chance-based thing that you can improve in various ways, but it's not guaranteed that you'll block every attack. You have to instead rely on mitigation and healing, because you cannot actively block. You don't hold a button to block. Your character will automatically perform that action if you got the chance to do so. It's also not possible to evade damage aside from running away. So with your character movement, you can't do things like roll dodging. You can parry and you can dodge, which is an automatic thing again, which is chance based. But when it comes to things like AoEs, you just have to run away, and sometimes you have to turn away from bosses, but movement is limited to those actions. When I entered my first dungeon, I was lucky to have slotted the Revenge ability, which is apparently good for AoE threat generation, and World of Warcraft mostly relies on threat as a way to keep aggro of enemies. You do have a taunt ability, which is typically used to pick up enemies that are at range, but it's not something that you rely on all the time to keep taunting the enemies, because they will just run off once the taunt is over if you haven't generated enough threat. You're mostly relying on being the instigator of combat, using threat boosting skills, and then pushing DPS to maintain aggro of enemies. Doing ad pulls wasn't the easiest thing to start with. Obviously, once I kind of got into a bit of a routine with how I was doing it, so I would throw my axe to start with, which is a high threat skill. I would charge in with my charge ability, and then I would cast a couple of AoE skills that would cause AoE damage, which would pull the threat onto me. At that point, I would kind of spin my camera around and look if any of the ads had run off, and then range taunt those into the stack, and then try and maintain some damage on those. Going into some dungeon boss fights, I started to see where there are potentially going to be some limits on how active a tank is going to be within content. There are some simple move out of AoE damage mechanics, but I don't really know how the mechanics are going to get that complicated for a tank with how the game pace and movement works. It just doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of really tricky mechanics compared to obviously some of the other games we've played. People have told me that the majority of content for a tank consists of either face tanking things or kiting, and then your main job is pretty much just holding aggro, pushing DPS while you rotate your buffs, and damage mitigation. One of the trickier aspects of tanking is when your healer gains the most threat of an enemy and then the enemy runs off. You then have to try and retarget to that enemy and taunt it, which I found to be really difficult. I think this is because when adjusting your camera view, you have to click and drag the screen, and other games it's just a simple move the mouse and it would adjust the screen. So because I didn't have that, it was a bit slow. Then you got to target the enemy, press your taunt, and I was really slow at doing this compared to the speed at which I can perform this kind of action in other MMO games. Overall, the experience of World of Warcraft so far has been an enjoyable one. The leveling process at the minute has gone from it was fun to start with in the first beginner island, and now as I'm getting into some of the other areas, it's not quite as exciting, but leveling in any MMO is never really super exciting anyway. No matter where you are in World of Warcraft, you'll always see plenty of other players running around, which is a good sign for an MMO. As usual, if you are a tank, you'll get into dungeons pretty much straight away when you queue up. Try to join a guild early on if you intend on tanking and learning content, or like me, you'll probably get booted from random groups for not being fast enough or not knowing where to stand or which way to go. A lot of the level 10 to 60 dungeons are really basic, but people want to speed through and do them quickly. They're not willing to wait and learn, and that is a bit of an issue, so you are going to be better off being in a guild. Generally, as a tank, the only things you really need to do, especially in those level 10 to 60 dungeons from what I've seen in the couple that I've done, they are basic. You just need to position bosses, keep aggro, rotate your cooldowns while making sure you keep yourself buffed up, especially with your mitigation when taking high damage. And that is more or less it. So that is my first impressions of World of Warcraft. We'll have more World of Warcraft tank information, builds, guides and more over the coming weeks. Make sure you follow the Tank Club and TC Lee social media channels, and bookmark the World of Warcraft page on thetankclub.com. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.